This is Philosophy Bites with me, David Edmonds.
And me, Nigel Warburton.
Philosophy Bites is available at www.philosophybites.com. Anglo-American philosophy exhibits its disdain for Indian philosophy by more or less ignoring it. But that, says Keith Ward, author of numerous books including Concepts of God, is a big mistake. Take idealism, a theory that the ultimate nature of reality is non-physical. There's a parallel tradition of idealism in both East and West, and according to Professor Ward, each could learn from the other.
Keith Ward, welcome to Philosophy Bites.
Hi.
We're going to focus on idealism, East and West. So what is idealism?
Well, I suppose idealism is the view that the fundamental reality is spiritual, not material. So it contrasts with materialism. And if you're a materialist, you say, well, ultimately everything's made up of little material bits probably and laws governing their interaction. So it's all material. Idealism is the opposite of that. So it's not all material. In fact, matter is an expression or appearance of something which is not material. You could say spiritual or mental or conscious, probably. So an idealist would think that ultimately this universe is an expression or manifestation of a conscious or mental reality.
So this is very much in the philosophical tradition of the distinction between appearance and reality, because most of us think we're moving in a material world. And in the idealist tradition, idealists believe that what appears to be just a material world has something beyond it, a deeper reality which is not material.
That's exactly right. I suppose this distinction goes back to Plato, doesn't it, really? And you think you're in the real world of touches and sights and sounds and so on. But actually, these are appearances of a deeper reality. And some things in modern physics suggest that that might be true as well. So you say, well, we're really in a 11-dimensional curved space-time, and it doesn't feel like that. And an idealist would agree with that, but say, actually, the reality which is beneath the appearances is mental or conscious in its nature.
And in Eastern philosophy, there's a great tradition of this kind of idealism.
Yes, there is. In fact, I think it's true of most Indian schools of philosophy that they'd make a big distinction between matter and spirit. I'm using English words for that, obviously. But there's distinction between matter and spirit has a greater reality than matter. There are lots of different Indian schools, but the idealist schools, which are usually called Vedantic schools, are idealist, basically. And they say that Brahman, that's you could translate as the absolute reality, has the nature of being, consciousness, and bliss. Sat, Chit, Ananda, being, consciousness, and bliss. And that everything is part of that one underlying reality. That's the Vedantic school of philosophy, which is one of the 6 major Indian schools of philosophy.
So that one combines idealism with a kind of monism, that everything is ultimately one underneath the world of appearances.
That's right. An idealist doesn't have to be a monist. You could think there are lots of different minds, and the English philosopher MacTaggart did used to believe that, lots of different minds. And Jains, the religious group, believe that. But in the Vedantic tradition, which is probably the best known Indian tradition, it's monistic as well. And they would use a text from the Upanishads that all is Brahman, everything is one. So we're all parts of this absolute reality.
So what follows from that in the Vedantic tradition? How should we live? How should we interact with the material world?
Well, there are different interpretations, as always, but one interpretation would be that you and I aren't really different beings, so we're not alien to each other. We're actually literally part of the same united reality. So the claim would be, if you see that, to see that properly, you'd have to be enlightened, and if you were enlightened and you saw that we're all parts of one reality, then that would overcome opposition and conflict and violence, because you'd think nothing is mine, nothing belongs to me, because I am just part of the whole. So there is an ethical implication of this for most Vedantins. I suppose the view would be that our individual selves are illusory in some sense. They're like the skins of an onion. You peel them away, your personality, your traits, the different dispositions you have. You take those away and you find that your true self, which is called Atman, the true inner self, is actually the same in everyone. We actually literally aren't different in some sense. It's an illusion. It's due to ignorance that we think we're different. So when you see that you are not an individual self which can possess something, but you're actually identical in your innermost reality with everyone else and with everything else, then possessiveness becomes a logical absurdity. That's the claim of one of the greatest Vedantin philosophers, the best known in the West, probably Shankara, who is probably 8th century AD.
And was he a Buddhist philosopher?
That is a very good question. Absolutely not. But yes, by that I mean his philosophy was invented in order to get rid of Buddhism from India, which he successfully did, but he did it by taking over all the Buddhist insights. This is a very naughty thing to say, but I think most scholars would agree that what Shankara did was use all the Buddhist insights, incorporate them into Hinduism, and say, oh, we don't need Buddhism anymore because we've got it all. So he's a crypto-Buddhist, but he would definitely say, I'm absolutely not a Buddhist.
Now, to be a bit sceptical here, I mean, why would anybody believe this? What's the evidence?
That is not a question that would have arisen for Shankara or for the other best-known Vedantin philosopher, Ramanuja. They believed it on scriptural authority. I mean, you have to say, if you're looking at classical Indian philosophy in the early medieval period, they just accept the Upanishads and the Veda as revealed, divinely given truth, given by the gods or supernatural beings. So Shankara just said, I believe this because it's in the scriptures. Now, things have changed, interestingly. So if you go to India today and you look at Vedantin philosophers, they will say the evidence is the experience of liberation. So you know that it's true because you meditate, you break through the boundaries of self and egoism, and you actually experience unity with the all. That stress on experience, ironically, comes from the German philosophical tradition, which has been imported into India since the 19th century and has given rise to what's now called Neo-Vedanta. And Neo-Vedanta doesn't say, we believe this just because it's in scripture. Neo-Vedantins would say, we believe this because somebody, perhaps me, but perhaps some guru that I follow, has experienced liberation and experienced this unity with the all. So now it's experience. But that's not true for the classical tradition.
Obviously, within the Western